Good afternoon. After a short recess for the summer, welcome back to this week's What Comes Next Live at 5 o'clock Tuesday UK time. My guest this week is Colin Newlyn. And for those of you who feel that work is crap, Colin's on a bit of a mission. Welcome, Colin. I look forward to hearing about your mission to decrapify work.
Hi, Tom. Yes, thank you for inviting me. Yes, my mission is to decrapify work because I think for a lot of people, work is somewhere between meh and awful. So that's something we need to address. And it's sort of drawing upon my own experience of corporate life, which was a bit of a mixed bag, really. So I had about a 25-year career in corporate. A large part of that was with a large telecommunications company, shall we say. Yep. And it sort of split into two halves. So the first half was a playground because it was, I was in these very entrepreneurial, fast-moving units. I was encouraged to come up with ideas and make stuff happen, and it was very supportive and fun. And then we got moved into another part of the business, which was almost the complete opposite. And it was very command and control, hierarchical, fear-driven organization. And that was more like a prison. So having experienced these two extremes of prison and playground, I know which one I preferred and which one was more productive. Because, in that first part, not only did I thrive, but the businesses were very creative and innovative and collaborative and all that stuff that organizations say they want. And yet, strangely, since, in my experience of being in the workforce since then, more and more organizations seem to become more like prisons than playgrounds. So I, that's really what Decrapify Work is about, is doing that and encouraging people to take action themselves to do that. And it's also a bit about making people aware of what's going on. I think I ended up, I ended up being quite a toxic workplace, and it was quite damaging. And I know that's happened to a lot of people because when I share my story, lots of people have similar tales to tell. And a lot of it was I just didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't understand the system I was in, and that a lot of this stuff is a product of the system. It's not that there's only one thing that causes it to be bad. It's a collision of lots of different things that end up making good people do bad things and creating bad experiences. So I think if people are armed with that knowledge and armed with some ideas and approaches to make some change happen, they can improve their workplace, and by which I mean their work experience and the experience of the people they interact with. And then that sends ripples out, and maybe that will change everything for the good. We can reach a tipping point.
So it's looking to explore at one level is you talk about the difference between a playground and a prison, and prison there's words like control and fear and some fairly toxic words. Is what you're basically is one of the premises you're starting from in order to empower people or have them feel empowered, that everybody thinks that's normal?
Yeah, I think so. Or are accepting of it, that that work shouldn't be fun, and it shouldn't be all those things. All those things at work that really annoy people. That's just part of it, and you can't do things differently. And that's patently not true because, I know you can do things differently. There's lots of examples of businesses out there that do take different approaches, but there seems to be this orthodoxy of, well, this is what work's about, and it's just all about squeezing more out of people and focusing on the numbers, and that's made, that's caused a lot of the problems. And I think we've driven a lot of humanity out of the workplace. And as the humans in the workplace, we can actually bring some of that back
Right.
Uh,
So you said you had 25 years in the sort of in the corporations. How long have you been out of that as I like you paraphrased my joke because I refer to myself as a recovering chartered accountant. You're a recovering corporate executive. So how long have you been in recovery?
about 20 years or
Okay.
so, yeah. So somebody once said to me, it takes you as long to get over corporate life as you spend in it. So
Hmm.
I'm nearly done. I'm almost back to normal,
You look too young to have got that long a career, but then you never know. That's a compliment. So with 20 years at differing levels, focused on how it could be different, um, where do you where do you start with that in terms of, well, the first thing is if you're an independent advisor or consultant, you need to find clients. So who's the ideal client for you?
So the people I really want to work with are the people who are in the middle of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Because my observation is that, that where the work gets done in organizations and where the culture is set is in teams.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the people that lead and are active in those teams that actually make stuff happen, set the tone and the culture, and conversely have the power to have change, to make change happen, because they can decide to do things differently and implement it within their sort of circle of control and within their circle of influence. And I borrow on the Be More Pirate sort of approach that you're familiar with, that you should ask for forgiveness rather than permission,
Mm-hmm.
and do what you think is the right thing within your environment.
Mm-hmm. For the audience, regular listeners to the podcast, my friend Alex Barker of Be More Pirate has been a guest. She's one of only 2 repeat guests, and I'll just drop in because it's timely at the time of recording that the other repeat guest was my first guest, my friend Mark Beaumont, who just broke the North Coast 500 record at the weekend, riding 500 miles non-stop on a bike in 28 hours.
Wow.
So there's a variety of guests on this podcast. So yeah, Be More Pirate. Similarly, within the not at the bottom or the top, but typically the middle of the organization is one way of looking at it. Or in the middle, it could be another meaning in terms of just in the thick of it, getting the work done and working in teams.
Yeah, and also in the middle, in terms of often being the ones that are trying to, they're sort of assaulted on both sides in some ways. In that, they want to support and help the people that are working for them, and they're certainly getting demands from below, but they're also getting a load of stuff shoved at them from the top,
Sure.
in terms of targets and strategy and all this sort of stuff. And so they're quite often feeling a little bit overwhelmed and squeezed, and that's disempowering. So part of the message is you need to take back your power and use your agency to because they're effectively doing it anyway. I think one of the problems in organizations, and we've seen some really stark examples of this recently with some of the surveys on productivity in the office and work at home. The people at the top have a completely different perception of how the world works to the people down the organization that make stuff happen. And so the people at the top make decisions and make strategy and pass it down. And then it hits the team leaders and the middle managers, who then have to try and convert it into something that the people that work for them can actually make use of. So they're sort of already doing this, saying they're doing one thing and doing another one. And I think they can use that capability to serve their own needs and the needs of their staff in a way that makes some change happen.
So in your sort of bio on the podcast, you wrote that you want to inspire people to use the agency they have to improve their own work experience and that of the people they work with, and ultimately the whole org. How do you find, what's the best way to reach them?
Well, I'm trying to reach them through, through speaking and writing and exercises like this. I think there's, that's a question I'm wrestling with at the moment, to be perfectly frank. Where's the best place to put the information? But part of it is trying to find stories of people that have made change happen in this way, and to give some practical tools or approaches, frameworks that they can use, and be a voice. I mean, so a lot of the stuff I write, and I post quite a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, I get a lot of responses from people because they agree with me, but they're not hearing anybody else. It's not the sort of things I write about aren't often talked about, because you don't talk about that stuff in an organization, because it's not allowed. So that's sort of my approach at the moment. I've been wondering whether I should go on TikTok or
or have lots of short podcasts with people who can speak to their examples.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm thinking about my own, the work I love to do, which is around purpose-led leadership, and I've chosen at this point in my career, having worked a lot with businesses of different sizes, different levels, I tend to simply work with the people at the top of the organization now. And I very much agree with you that culture is created, I would say not just at the middle, but at every level of the organization. Yeah. So you have to, spend most of your time listening if you're a CEO. I just was lucky enough to meet with the CEO of the RSA last week. And my big takeaway from the meeting was he's a great listener. All right. I thought, well, that's perfect. He's only been in the job 6 months. And one of the things I hear is very negative language around CEOs of corporates, and that they're only interested in money and bonuses and fat cats and all this stuff. And I just simply say, not the ones I choose to work with. All right, and whether they're in a very large organization or a medium-sized or a smaller organization, I'm much more interested in their behavior than the size of the organization as a client. And I guess you can either work within this, outside the system, and protest and be radical and look to tear it down, or you can look to be a little bit subversive and work inside it. So I think in thinking of your example and getting some understanding of the Be More Pirate ethos, is if you're actually going to make change happen, sometimes it's, this is a bit contradictory, but sometimes it's getting companies to pay you to help them with this work. But then there is a level to which people go, oh, well, you're just preaching to the converted. But what occurs to me is there was a great book by Michael Lewis, who's written so many important books, but one of them is called Moneyball. And it was about a low-ranked, low-budget Major League Baseball team that started to run based not on gut feel of scouts who've been in the game 40 years, but based on mathematics. Well, nobody else was doing it. And now a lot of people are doing it, including, for those in the UK who follow football, there's a team called Brentford, which is in the top half of the Premier League, the toughest league in the world. And I defy people to name one of their players, all right, because it's a Moneyball team. But they've taken Moneyball to another level, because everybody's doing Moneyball and doing big data based, crunching the numbers, etc. There's something about the culture of that team that is making it work that you can't, the big data analysis can't do it. But the reason I use that story is that sometimes change happens because the market follows the leaders. And I am utterly convinced that a more, whether it's, you call it purpose-led, values-driven, or just simply a more human work environment that is more playground than prison, results in happier people who are more productive. So some of it is maybe, whether it is preaching to the converted, is like working with companies that go, okay, come help us decrapify work and talk to people and give speeches and stuff like that. So, and that's
I think
one avenue.
That's absolutely, obviously I agree with your conclusion that playgrounds are, create happier people. and happier people create better organizations that are on all criteria. And I suppose, I mean, yeah, part of the, you know, the Be More Pirate approach is actually very much based around values, but expressing those values, as you know, in behaviours and in principles and in community, and that's really what makes the difference. So a forward-thinking progressive organisation should want that to be happening in their organisation, and I think looking at a broader organisational level, then I think the way companies should be, what they should be moving to is networks of teams, and much less hierarchy and bureaucracy, and much more autonomy and self-management, self-direction within those teams. And in that environment, you know, that you won't get there if you keep all the bureaucracy and if you don't have honest exchange and evaluation of what's going on, and give everybody a voice. And that's really, you know, the essence of what Decrapify Work is about. And a lot of organizations are, you know, the ones that don't get it are not wanting to go in that direction. I think the ones that do get it, they know that's where they want to go, and they want some help getting there. And I'm more than happy to help.
Well, I think sorry, I'm thinking of various things, and you know, if people, for me, the most important book on this topic written in a very long time, about 10 years ago, was a book called Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux.
Yeah. One of my touchstones as well.
Yeah, and it's all about self-management and non-hierarchical organizations. And I was the CEO of a non-hierarchical organization for a couple of years, about 8 years ago. So all of the principles are out there. I think one of the things that I'm hearing from you, which is a special space that you're in, is, you know, one of the things you're noting is people don't tend to talk about the crap stuff about work. And one of my mentors used the phrase, used to sign off every email in her email signature, said awareness is the greatest agent for change. And you talk about the economic term of agency or self-empowerment, and knowing we all have the ability to make choices. Sort of Viktor Frankl-esque as well, if you're into that as well. Yeah. But you've got a potential role simply bringing awareness and having conversations. I can imagine, I mean, you use the word, but there's a lot of, I'm a bit of an NLP guy around language. So, you know, words like should, must, have to, and stuff tend to be eliminated from the language of, I'm quite easy for those things, a conversation with people around this to turn into a bit of a negativity session. Let's call it, not using a slightly more politically correct word than the word we used to use a few years ago. But, you know, I think it's really powerful just to get out there and talk about examples, and then so perhaps maybe give a few examples you've come across, or talk about where things are, where work is crap, and what can people do differently. What tips might you have where people can do things differently once they're aware that it doesn't have to be crap?
Yeah, I think the awareness is important, and I think one of the things that people don't always appreciate is organisations sort of inculcate this learned helplessness in people, and that's just what the system does. So it's like, well, this is the way we do it, and there's no other way of doing it. And if you try and do it a different way, you get smacked around the head. And you know, it's like I always say, you know, if you went to a bar, no matter how good the bar, if every time you walked in someone punched you in the face, you would stop going there after a while. So after a while, you say, you know, like, I'm just going to not do that anymore, and just accept things the way they are, because that's easy. And the people I'm really trying to speak to are the people like I was in the organisation, which is, I can't do that. I can't just go with it if I know it's wrong, or it could be better. I have to try and change it. because if you do give up, if you're that sort of person that you have to do, make it better. If you give up, then a little part of your soul is dying every day.
Totally.
And it can lead to some very dark places for people. So it's about having that initial, the inner rebellion that all pirates have to go through to say, actually, I'm going to make a change happen here, and then to start, breaking some rules, but to do it in a way that means you won't get into trouble. So it is a much more less direct, less confrontational, more subversive approach, if you like, of making change happen. And it's about finding the people, the like-minded people who are going to be your crew and be with you. And when I was in this toxic bit of the organisation, I already had a bunch of crewmates and who we all supported each other and had each other's backs. And yeah, there's various sort of strategies you can take. So pick on things that are annoying but aren't really that important and change those. So it could be really simple stuff like these meetings we have are pointless, so we're not going to go to them, or no, we're going to cut all our meetings to half an hour because half of it's just because it's an hour in the calendar. Or even things like, there are some tactics for improving culture, that like some of them have been mentioned by Bruce Daisley in his book Joy of Work. So things like putting boundaries around when you send and receive emails.
Yeah.
So you as a team can say, we are not doing any emails at the weekend. And if any of us get emails from anybody, we don't reply to them until Monday morning. Because although you might get some pushback from the organisation, if you're doing it as a team, as a crew, you're much stronger that way. And if you've got a rationale behind it, which is we need a break at the weekend, otherwise we're not fit, it's for our mental health, that's more likely to stick than the one person just appearing to be a bit of a loose cannon, as we used to be called, and going against things which is interpreted as someone just being a rebel for the sake of it. It doesn't make change happen.
That's really interesting. Because I guess a key word for me as an individual is bravery, and I tend to attract people looking to be brave. And whether they're foolhardy or brave, who knows? But sometimes they are individuals who take those bold actions. But it's really interesting, that looking to understand and empathize is that sometimes it takes people to be in a group or crew or team environment in order to take these what the Be More Pirate people would call a small act of rebellion. I must say, just to touch on that one for a bit, I have been espousing the idea of having core hours for emails for many, many years. And it's one of the tips I give to overworked and overwhelmed clients a lot. But yes, the response I'll often give is, I can't do that. People expect it of me. Yeah.
And I suppose the argument I would make is we'll find a way of changing their expectations.
Totally.
So, and that could be, maybe you all decide that you're going to put a footer on your email saying, we won't respond to emails at weekends, or but you can do it in a jokey way. You could say, I don't know, if you email us outside of work hours, sorry, we can't reply because we're on our pirate ship, or we're on our desert island counting our treasure, so we're out of reach.
Well, we can overstretch the pirate metaphor, but yeah,
but I just use that. There'll be something that you might come up with an idea and say, well, that's just a little bit cheeky. But
I stole a similar idea from somebody years ago, because I was dealing with a lawyer on a matter, all right, called commercial law, and I sent them an email, and they said, I will be out of office for 3 hours between such and such and such and such, while I have dental surgery. I'll be back on my BlackBerry by 1 o'clock. And I went, and believe it or not, given that most law firms in my experience are governed by governed by responsiveness. It's one of their core commercial values, not expertise, not being considered, but how quickly do you reply to every email and all that kind of thing. I just thought this is just too much. So I was off on vacation for 3 weeks shortly after that. So I stole this idea from somebody. I put an out of office on my emails that said, any emails received in this 3-week period will be deleted permanently. If you wish to reach me, email me on or after such and such a date. Meanwhile, I'll be on vacation, right? And I didn't actually delete the emails. I technically couldn't be bothered to find out how I could do that. But I just remember getting a burst of emails in the first few days of people going, that's really cool. I wish I was brave enough to do that. So, but that's an interesting act of rebellion. The other one you mentioned, just recapping, is like, shorter meetings, more effective meetings, just setting boundaries, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot, and also identifying those unspoken rules that you're all obeying. So, maybe there's certain formats of meetings that run and nobody asks the question at the beginning that would actually shorten the meeting because you're not allowed to ask the question to the end. It's like, well, why don't we ask that question at the beginning, and as a crew, we'll take turns to do it. So we'll, a bit like in a football team when they will take turns to foul the best player on the other team. No one will get really badly punished, but eventually the point will be made. This works better if we do it this way around. So it is about having some courage.
But
courage is a muscle you develop. So, I think one of the things we have to be cognizant of is not everybody has the same thresholds.
Not at all.
To start with, simply saying, simply not answering emails till you're back in the office or something like that might be a really, really big barrier. Or asking a question in a meeting may be something that someone's really struggling with. So, take that first step, and then yourself. The more you do it, it's the more you step outside your circle of comfort, the bigger your circle of comfort becomes. Ultimately, the people that take the bold actions have been exercising that muscle for some time, and have got to a point where they're really happy taking the risk because they can see that if it doesn't work out, they're happy to move on to something else. And I think that's the other message I like to say to people is this is about increasing your resources as well. So the more that you use your power and your agency to make change happen in your world, the more resourceful you become. So that if it does come to a point where you think, actually, I can't stay in this company anymore, or maybe the company made that decision, you are in so much a better place to go on to the next thing in your career or the next step you want to take in your life, because you've empowered yourself. You've built your courage muscle up. You've experimented with things. You've done so much more than you would have done if you'd just sat there following the rules all day.
And I'll go back to a thought from something you said a few minutes ago, but I like there's always the language of, what do we mean by words? So, agency is a word from economics that basically means self-empowered or the fact you have the power, which is, and people aren't aware they have that. But I remember when I was diagnosed, I had cancer this year for a few months, and I'm through the other side of it, but quite a learning experience. And I remember when I got it, I said to a number of people, I feel really well resourced. And they thought, what tools have you got around you? I went, no, I just said in myself, I feel able to cope with this and handle that. So that building your toolkit is part of it. And my thought is really around bravery and bold. And I think bravery and boldness are in the eye of the beholder and taking a tiny step. And I remember I trained as a coach well over a decade ago. And one of the things they trained us in very much was take a lot of time over making sure you've got the specific agenda of the client. Right? And I would have a meeting with somebody who'd asked to meet me about potentially working with them or their business. And it might be a 1 hour meeting in a coffee shop. And I might spend 45 minutes exploring what it was they want to talk about. And they're so used to people running into a meeting and going, this is the agenda, right, let's get into it.
Yeah.
And the example, and so somebody taught me this example, and then I used it, and it felt scary the first time I did it. And the example was that, imagine you're in a voluntary meeting of an evening, a school parent-teacher association or something. It doesn't have to be in a corporate world. And it's being held at 7:00 at night in your hometown or whatever. And everybody's tired, they've come home from work, etc. They go to the meeting, and there's an agenda listed, and there'll be standing committees and all this stuff in a monthly or quarterly meeting. And if you've got something that's a really burning issue for you, when do you get to talk about it? What's the agenda point called?
Any other business.
Any other business, AOB, and it's at the very end. So what typically happens is these meetings overrun, normally by an hour or two, and I'm not exaggerating. And then people, you literally get to point 7 on the agenda, and point 8 is any other business. After point 7, people start picking up their bags and getting ready to go. And imagine you're the person who had one really burning thing you wanted, you're a junior committee member, you had one burning thing. Then you haven't been paying full attention. And if it happens then, next time you show up, you're just going to neither not show up or this happens. Well, I was on the board of a national swimming association and for several years, and I wasn't chairing the meeting, so I was waiting for AOB and just watching people get upset every single time. And these meetings ran and ran and ran and ran. They weren't very effective. People really enjoyed the meetings, talking about swimming once every couple of months. Then I became the president of the association, and I'm chairing the meetings. And I'd just done the coach training, and I actually, now thinking back on it, what you're talking about, bravery muscle, I felt quite scared. And I went, I'm going to do something different. Right. And I didn't do it by email in advance. Eventually we moved to that. But I spent 15 to 20 minutes teasing out anything that people had to talk about. And I said, and I wrote it down. I said, we will get to this point. And if for any reason we don't cover all of the points in this meeting, I will take them offline with you and deal with them in the next 2 working days. And it was quite scary to do it. But you know what I noticed after that? Everybody was paying attention because they went, oh, I'm going to get heard when it comes time. But it was a tiny step, and it's now the standard practice for that organization, right? But it felt so radical. I was in my mid to late 40s when I learned that, right? And it's like, and how many meetings I'd attended in the previous 20 plus years, right? That were never run that way. It was always stick the stuff at the end. And if people show up, particularly for something they're passionate about, like a voluntary sports committee, right? They're going to have that burning issue. There's going to be something they want to talk about, whether it's fundraising or a particular event or something like this. And if you don't give them the chance to talk about it, it's not an effective meeting.
No.
So I'm going to give her a plug, and I really want to get her on my show, my podcast, is my friend Dr. Carrie Goucher literally just finished a PhD in meetings. And she has now jumped back into a passion of sharing what she's learned after a multi-year PhD at Cambridge University. And she's running a business called Fewer, Faster, Bolder. And that's all about fewer, faster, bolder meetings. And she's on LinkedIn a lot. For the audience, just because I'm too lazy to do podcast notes, Carrie, Carrie, Goucher, Goucher. But maybe connect with her yourself, Colin. And
that sounds
collaboration in there.
That's one of my bugbears is there was this Microsoft report out this week about saying that there was a big they were embracing hybrid, and they'd seen a big uptake in meetings on Teams. And I thought, well, you haven't embraced hybrid properly, have you really? Because if you're really moving to new ways of working, there should be much fewer meetings.
There you go.
Because you should be doing it outside of meetings, So
we've talked about a couple of tips. So first of all, it's around awareness. Things can be different, and you can have more agency, and you can break rules and make good trouble and small acts of rebellion. And then we said, well, and you talked about how doing it in a team can be a way of working somebody's bravery muscle and not be seen to be a loose cannon. And we used a couple of examples, one around not sending emails outside core business hours, and another one around how to run a meeting. Have you maybe got one more tip for us before some closing thoughts?
I guess I think one of the things, if you want to make change happen and not get into trouble, then one of the ways to do it is to get someone else to come up with the ideas. So finding other allies in the organization, possibly at a slightly senior level, and getting them to present your ideas, and familiarizing with the changes you'd like to see can be quite effective. Because if your idea does make it up to discussion, there's someone else who can say, oh yeah, I agree with that. Or even better, if they take it on board and start pushing it themselves. It's tricks like that. It's sort of doing, and I say carrying on doing what you're doing, which is do what you want, but make it look like you're doing it in the way you're supposed to do it. Is a very effective tool.
If you're having a meeting, you're having a meeting. If you're sending emails, you're sending emails, but you're just doing these small things that also take some of the crap out of work and make it more joyful, right? Or at least more fun. It's not, I mean, the example of me around the email was a friend of mine who was an independent. They weren't in corporate and they're a solo business and they were busy till 8 o'clock at night every night, but they never got to touch their emails all day. So what did they do at 8 o'clock at night? It was answer all their emails. And they worked in, personal training and massage therapy and stuff like this. So most of their clients were sitting on their iPads in front of the TV at that time of night, and they got used to receiving emails between 8 and 9. And all this person wanted to do was clear their emails before they went to bed. All right. So what happened between 8 and 9 when they sent the emails? They got a whole bunch of replies in. So I said, just schedule them for the next morning. This was a revelation and was life-changing. And your last thought, to play off your last thought, if we were to look at the psychometric profiles of most senior leaders, a lot of them come from a style of which one of the behaviors in there, which is difficult to understand if you don't have that style, is that they will hear a whole bunch of ideas and their brain will process them overnight and they'll wake up in the morning thinking it was their idea. And it's so one of the things you have to get comfortable with in the corporate world, and sometimes it'll be true that it's their ego and they just want to steal the idea. But a lot of the time they genuinely think they've come up with the idea because there's so much information flowing across them. So one of the things to get comfortable with is that if you do implant or incept, if you like the movie, the idea into somebody's head, the most effective thing is if they show up in a meeting in which they're more senior than you and you're sitting in the meeting and they go, I had this great idea the other day. I think we should do this. And you have to bite your lip and just go, okay, it was my idea, but you know what? It's happening and I've made it happen. So that's just my implementation tip, is that even better than having somebody get on side with your idea is having them steal it.
Yeah. And if you can, I mean, one of the things we talk about, is in Be What Pirate is telling tall tales, and, it's about getting the message across. If you can find a very distinctive and maybe slightly funny way of framing the idea, then they will pick that up. And so whenever they say that, all the people who know you will think, yeah, we know where that idea came from. So
very cool.
You get your credit eventually, and it sells it better as well. I mean,
yeah. So three very useful and small and subversive, rebellious acts that we can do to take some of the crap out of work.
Absolutely.
Closing thoughts from you, Colin, before we finish?
There's a lot of crap that can be taken out of work, so people should get busy, I think.
Okay, fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure, and may we have more playgrounds than prisons at work.
Absolutely.